welcome back to On the Grid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 19. Today we've got a bumper episode lined up for you lot. So we're first looking at the Canadian Grand Prix because we missed a week. And then we'll be moving on to the Spanish Grand Prix, running through our predictions for both of those before we look ahead to Austria this weekend. Joining with me as ever is Adrian. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Obviously, our listeners will not have heard our voices for approximately about 2 weeks now. I apologise for going on a little mini hiatus, going on holiday. So I did a bit of an Ethan. I went on holiday, and now we're back to kind of have a 3-in-1 episode for you guys, mixed in with Formula 2 and Formula 3. So without further ado, let's get into it because it's going to be a long one.
So if you just briefly recap the Canadian Grand Prix, so obviously Max Verstappen won from Lando Norris from George Russell in what was a very, very entertaining Grand Prix following the absolute snooze fest at Monaco. So we'll run through our 1 to 10 driver prediction or driver rating, sorry. So we collectively gave Max Verstappen an 8.5. Lando Norris got a 9 out of 10 from the pair of us. George Russell got a 9 out of 10 as well. Lewis Hamilton ended up with an 8.5. Oscar Piastri in 5th place got 7.5 from 2 of us. Fernando Alonso got an 8 out of 10. Lance Stroll got a 6.5 out of 10. Daniel Ricciardo with an 8.5. Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon in the Alpines. Pierre Gasly getting an 8, so same as Esteban Ocon. Nico Hulkenberg got a 7 out of 10 overall. Kevin Magnussen with a 7 out of 10 as well. Valtteri Bottas got a 6 out of 10. Yuki Tsunoda getting a 4 out of 10. Guan Yu Zhou with a 5.5 out of 10. Carlos Sainz with a 3 out of 10. Alex Albon with a 6.5. Sergio Perez got a 1.5 from us. So too did Charles Leclerc. And Logan Sargent, wrapping things up, got a 3.5 out of 10. And what that means for the overall 1 to 10 ratings from the pair of us is that Max Verstappen regains the lead from Charles Leclerc, who has dropped down to 3rd. He has dropped massively with just getting that 1.5 out of 10. So Lando Norris jumps up to 2nd. So Verstappen with an 8.56, Norris 8.44, and Leclerc 7.83. Carlos Sainz is right on the back of Leclerc now with a 7.81. Oscar Piastri is next with 7.67, and then George Russell jumps up ahead of Nico Hulkenberg to 6th. They're on 7.44 and 7.22 respectively. Lewis Hamilton climbs up, getting up to a 6.67, slightly edging out Yuki Tsunoda with a 6.61. And Fernando Alonso is back in the top 10, replacing Sergio Perez. He's on a 6.56. So, Adrian, what's your thoughts on that and the Canadian Grand Prix in general?
My initial thoughts, you might want to get a glass of water because that was a lot for you to take in. And in general, I think the Canadian Grand Prix overall showed us what sort of chaos can happen with a wet track and a drying track and then another wet track and so on and so forth. Ferrari absolutely decided to roll the dice with Charles Leclerc on a wet track with hard tires, which completely bamboozled me. But I mean, what can you do when you're running last and with a significantly underpowered engine? Ferrari completely flopped. I think the two Mercedes drivers of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton absolutely thrived with their upgrades. And they're ticking along very well. Lando Norris did his usual self. Max Verstappen, even with an interesting race which caused so many twists and turns, he still ended up getting the race victory, which nobody wanted to see. But hey, this kind of stuff happens. But yeah, overall, I think a lot of people will have enjoyed the Canadian Grand Prix and gone, yeah, this has been such a spectacle. But then again, I don't think you'll get in many races that will be like that throughout the rest of the season. So to have a mishmash of a race, mixed up top 10 was great to see. But kind of with the next kind of thing that we're looking at, especially our Canadian Grand Prix predictions. Those kind of all fell flat on their face. So yeah, an exciting spectacle, but for prediction's sake, everything fell flat on its face.
Yeah, I got to say, after that race, I came away from it thinking, how on earth has Max Verstappen won that race? Because George Russell led from start, he looked very comfortable when the track was wet. Then you had Lando Norris take the lead, got that big gap, but made a mistake with the safety car, not pitting immediately. And then, you saw the other drivers all making mistakes. You had Piastri make a couple of mistakes, Lando Norris and George Russell both making mistakes and battling each other, really. And then nobody could really keep on track and keep it clean like Max Verstappen did. And I think what we're seeing now is we're starting to see the Max Verstappen effect. I don't think that Red Bull is the quickest car, as we'll get on to Spain in a minute. But again, I no longer think that the Red Bull is the quickest car. I think it's Max Verstappen being the best driver on the grid that's given him the edge. And this is exactly why, although, yeah, you see the McLarens, you see the Ferraris, potentially the Mercedes now competing for wins. Verstappen is going to comfortably win this championship because he's the most consistent driver on the grid. But anyway, getting on to our Canada predictions, I'll kick things off with my two-star predictions. So I got 50%. I got 1 out of 2, 3 plus DNFs I had, and obviously there were a bunch in the race. And then I had another one which looked like it was going to happen the entire race, and that was Alex Albon to get points. He was unfortunately taken out by Carlos Sainz. But so just the 1 point for me there. How did you get on?
Yeah, nil pois. I also had Alex Albon points until a certain Spaniard decided to be a lawnmower on the wet grass and just like spin and take him out. And after the optimism of Monaco, silly old me decided to put Ferrari double podium. And once again, that fell flat on its face. So yeah, nil pois. I can wholeheartedly tell you I only got one, and you know where that comes from. So yeah, I don't think I need to say much regarding these predictions. They were absolutely woeful.
Yeah, if we move on to our qualifying, then I had Lando Norris on pole, Leclerc second, Verstappen, Piastri, and Sainz wrapping up the top five. I got 1 out of 5 with Oscar Piastri getting fourth place, but not too good from me. And then if we move on to the race, I had Piastri to actually get his first win, which he wasn't a million miles off. He was on the back of that train, but I think his he fell off towards the end, holding off the Mercedes on the fresh tyres, and it didn't happen. Norris in second, which I got right, and then Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen wrapping up the top five. And yeah, like I said, Ferrari had an absolute stinker, which ruined that for me.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that I've got Max Verstappen race victory. That's all I got. So 1 out of 12.
So if we now move on to talking about the Spanish Grand Prix. So out in Q1, Logan Sargent, no surprise there. Alex Albon qualifying 19th, his worst qualifying position of the season. And then you got the V-Carbs of Tsunoda and Ricciardo and Kevin Magnussen wrapping up the bottom five. Double V-Carb Q1 exit and Alex Albon. So 3 big names that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be knocked out in that first session. Are we seeing that, maybe the RBs are being caught up by the rest of those midfield cars like the Haas's and even the Saubers?
No, I don't think so. I just think that their upgrades that they recently put on are simply not working. It's we saw similar to Aston Martin where they just completely fell flat on their faces when it came to upgrades, and they've slowly but surely started to pick up the pace now. But the V Carbs have simply gone backwards after their upgrades. They're not doing very well. 17th and 18th on the grid, respectively for Sonoda and Daniel Ricciardo in qualifying. But I just think like it's the similar fate, like I said, of Aston Martin, where their upgrades just simply aren't working. I don't know what it's down to or whatever, but yeah, that's just simply not working. We could sit here and say that they have been caught by the rest of the midfield teams, but the midfield team that's really shocked me and everybody else is Alpine, which we'll get onto a bit later on. But VCarb are struggling to kind of understand what their upgrades have actually bought them because their upgrades seem to be more like downgrades than anything at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. If we then look forward to Q2, so out in this session, Guan Yu Zhou getting into Q2 for the first time this season, qualified in 15th. Lance Stroll in 14th, Nico Hulkenberg 13th, Valtteri Bottas up in 12th, and then Fernando Alonso scraping, or being, sorry, I think it was Esteban Ocon scraping through at Fernando Alonso's expense by just under 200ths of a second. Both Aston Martins yet again knocked out. That's not a good sign, is it? For, when you looked at the start of the season, there was clearly the top five and the bottom five. Aston Martin are really getting dragged down into that, isn't it? And even Fernando Alonso isn't able to get the performance that he once was.
I'm going to say again, I think the teams that are ahead of him, so you've got your McLarens, you've got your Red Bulls, you've got your Mercedes and your Ferraris, and now even potentially the Alpines. I think all those five teams are slowly getting ahead of Aston Martin. Well, I mean, the four that I mentioned beforehand are certainly a long way away ahead of the Red Bulls, but ahead of the Aston Martins. But I think the Alpine team are have slowly gained the ground that they needed to gain on the rest of the field and have gained tremendously, especially on Aston Martin. I think especially the Spanish Grand Prix because there's so much pre-season testing happening around Barcelona. This kind of track is suited to kind of gauging where most teams will be at for especially maybe the second half of the season. And I think with Alpine, it may not be like an outlier that this was one of the best weekends on record since the start of the season. But I think they're slowly starting to get back into their groove and slowly starting to gain a little bit of ground on where they were at this point of us well but where they were at the start of the season, shall we say. So Aston Martin and Alpine could have a tasty battle by the end of the season because with Fernando Alonso going pointless once again and Lance Stroll being absolutely nowhere once again, it's kind of a little bit of a troublesome time. But I mean, everybody upgrades their car as the season goes on, so it's only a matter of time where maybe an upgrade will work for Aston Martin and go in their favour, and they're finally popped up into the top 10 once again. But it's not looking good, and certainly something needs to happen. I kept on saying it at the back end of the last season. They need upgrades, and this time, once again, they need upgrades. But similar to the V-Carb team, they need upgrades and not downgrades to propel them up into the fifth fastest car once again.
Yeah, we'll just jump on what you said a minute ago about Alpine, who seem to have turned a corner from their early season struggles. Qualified seventh and ninth. Gasly getting the better of Esteban Ocon, and that is now the third time in a row that he's done so, Pierre Gasly. Had a pretty poor start, but now, like we said, they're starting to turn the corner. Do you think the future's looking bright for Alpine?
Yes, I do think so. Obviously they've brought in Flavio. What's his face? What's his name? Flavio.
Briatore.
That's it. Viatori, that's his name. Yeah, they've brought him back as an advisor. He's not come back as a team principal per se. He's come back as an advisor. And they're yet again another team that are trying to sign Carlos Sainz. As this kind of Carlos Sainz saga continues, but as I said, Barcelona is a track where most of the testing happened and still does, and this track sort of shows that Alpine are slowly moving in the right direction. And with them getting another points finish, it's important for them to just keep on plugging away and gain upwards on the car and kind of gaining knowledge on which kind of department they're lacking in. But it's definitely after qualifying and after the race, it's definitely steps in the right direction. It's just whether they can maintain that and continue that for the rest of the season.
I'll let you talk about your boys in the Ferraris, fifth and sixth. After the struggles in Canada, and then to only qualify fifth and sixth, looks like they may have been leapfrogged by the Mercedes. How much of that if that is a concern.
I think already Fred Vasseur has gone on record and said that at Barcelona, at Spielberg, and at Silverstone, those three tracks are likely to be tracks where the Ferrari, the Scuderia will struggle. And it's rather disappointing to go through the heights of a double podium at Monaco to then having a double DNF at Canada and then only finishing fifth and sixth in qualifying in Spain. So it's disappointing. Clearly, Mercedes's upgrades are working a lot better. We obviously saw Charles Leclerc up in second in Q1. But obviously, there's obviously a Mercedes up ahead of him, a Lewis Hamilton that went quicker. And then the two Mercedes kind of brought it on in Q2 and then Q3. They were there or thereabouts, but Lando Norris produced a fantastic lap to get himself on pole position. But it's a kick in the teeth, don't get me wrong. But it's certainly something that I was expecting. I think Ferrari's specialties are street tracks. We saw that at Monaco. We saw that at Singapore last season. And it's a long time until we get a street track once again. So it might be a few weeks slash months of struggles, but with upgrades, hopefully there comes a better package and hopefully a little bit more speed because after the low engine modes on Charles Leclerc's car in Canada, alarm bells were certainly ringing. Carlos Sainz wasn't quick at all either. So yeah, it was alarm bells ringing, but something that I'm sure the Scuderia are looking to rectify and to kind of make sure that they're back on top of the Mercedes and challenging for podiums once again.
Yeah, I'll talk about my boys in Mercedes with, Russell and Hamilton. Hamilton edging out Russell for, I think, which is only the second time this season. The upgrades look like they're working, I think. I think that Hamilton and Russell do have the same car, but you see Hamilton's, particularly his whole demeanor shifts now that he's got that good car. And I think it's very similar to Alonso, in that you give these guys a car worthy of challenging and they will extract the absolute maximum. But if you've got a car which is underperforming, it's not right, there's issues with it, then they're not up to, they don't have that same mentality, the same desire and to extract that extra couple of hundredths of a second. But as soon as they have that confidence in the car, then you can just see the results. So I think it's definitely a positive to see. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see how it develops over these next couple of tracks. Hopefully, it should be a couple of good performances for them. And if we look at that, the pole man, Lando Norris, edging out Max Verstappen by just 200ths of a second. Is it fair to say Lando Norris had the quickest car this weekend?
Yes, it's as simple as that. We obviously talked about Red Bull potentially not being the quickest car, and I do agree with that. I don't think they have the quickest package. You can see where Sergio Perez is in relation to that, and I think Sergio Perez undermines that very well. I think they're definitely behind the two Mercedes, they're behind the Ferraris, and they're behind the Red Bulls, behind the McLaren, sorry. So it's the Max Verstappen effect that Harvey was on about last episode. It shows kind of the quality that Max Verstappen has, but he wasn't able to keep out Lando Norris, and I think Lando Norris completely turned it on him on that last run where Oscar Piastri couldn't, and he absolutely did. He extracted everything. The third sector was a little bit off, but the middle and the last kind of made up for it, and he was able to cross the line just ahead of Max Verstappen on time. So yeah, Lando Norris definitely had the quickest car. McLaren probably had the quickest package. Obviously, we couldn't see that with Oscar Piastri, but Lando Norris showed us that McLaren are there and they're the real deal.
And then let's move on to our 1 to 10 driver ratings. So we'll kick things off with Max Verstappen, obviously getting the win. It's a 10 out of 10 performance for me. It's like I said earlier in the episode, this is now the Max Verstappen factor. It's like we've said so many times now. The McLaren was by far the quickest car this weekend, and Verstappen made the difference. He got the jump on Norris at the start. Yes, he was overtaken by Russell, but then he quickly dispatched him because Mercedes didn't quite have that level of race pace that the McLaren and Red Bull had. And then once he got into the lead, was there any doubt? I know Norris went on a different strategy, but by By the time he got up into second, the gap was already 6 or 7 seconds. And then by the time he came out of his first pit stop, it was up to about 11 or 12, and he had Mercedes to overtake again. In my mind, there was no doubt Verstappen was going to win. I know the commentators tried to egg it up as much as possible, but I think it was a foregone conclusion as soon as Max Verstappen took the lead. So 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I don't think I can really add much more. Purely on the basis that I'm also giving Max Verstappen a 10 out of 10. Yeah, I don't think I can add much more. The Max Verstappen effect is in full swing. He didn't have the quickest car. Obviously, George Russell made that leaping start and overtook both Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, which, funnily enough, we have a little meme on our TikTok, and the George Russell meme absolutely kills me off every single time I see it. But yeah, it's just different gravy. Max Verstappen is completely different gravy. He's in a completely different class to all the other drivers. You've obviously got your Norrises, your Russells, your Leclercs, your Hamiltons, your Sainzes in that A grade category, and then in the S tier, you've got Max Verstappen who does it week in week out. Puts it on the first row. Even if he gets overtaken by George Russell, he still passes him. He was getting close by Lando Norris, but he was able to bridge that gap and kind of maintain it and lead as much as he could have. And he got the race victory. So it's a 10 out of 10, isn't it? There's no doubt about that.
Lando Norris up next. I've gone for an 8 out of 10. Like I said, I think if you put Verstappen in the McLaren and Norris in the Red Bull, I think Verstappen wins that race comfortably. So now the last couple of races, Norris has had the quickest car and he's not been able to get the win. And you could argue since Miami, really, the McLaren's been the quickest car. So that's the last 5 races. I think only Monaco, where Leclerc done a fantastic job, as we talked about after that race. Every other race, Norris has had the quickest car in that McLaren, and apart from Miami, Verstappen's won all of them: Imola, Canada, and now Spain. So it's an 8 out of 10 for me, and I think that might be being a little bit nice.
I'll disagree with you. I've gone with a 9 out of 10 for Lando Norris. The guys put it on pole. Let's not take that away with it away from that from him. And he's finished in second as well. He could have easily crumbled. And after George Norris. Why am I adding two names together? George Russell overtook the pair of them at the start, and he could have completely crumbled, but he didn't. And he came back with vengeance. He didn't. He obviously probably needed about 5 more laps to overtake Max Verstappen. But the car is good enough to kind of catch Max Verstappen up, and we can see that because he gained so much time, but he just didn't have enough laps. So I don't think I think 8 out of 10 is a bit harsh. Yes, he is driving the quickest car, but like we spoke, the Max Verstappen effect is in full swing, and I don't think that uh, in one way or another, I don't think Max Verstappen was thinking of anything else but a race victory in Spain. So yeah, I've settled with a 9 out of 10 for Lando Norris. Good quality lap, good race pace, and a good P2 finish once again. But it's just unfortunate that he can't extract the full thing out of his car and get himself another race victory because, like we mentioned, his car is the quickest car on the grid at the moment.
And next up is Lewis Hamilton. So he started third in quali and finished third. I've gone for a 9 out of 10. I think he was the quickest in the Mercedes in the Spanish Grand Prix. I know Russell obviously got him at the start. I think Hamilton had a slightly poor start, but it'll be interesting to see what Hamilton could have done if he was in front of Russell because he was clearly quicker than him. He was on the better strategy as well, but I think regardless, whatever strategy you put those two on, Hamilton was beating Russell in that race, particularly because of the disappointment from missing out in Canada. I think that, yeah, Hamilton put in a very good performance, so it's a 9 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one as well. Finally, Lewis Hamilton back on the podium for the first time in forever, it seems. And yeah, he delivered a very good qualifying lap when it mattered, and he was able to jump his teammate who was on a different strategy, decided to fit the hards, and Lewis Hamilton fitted the softs, and the soft benefited a lot at the end of a race. So yeah, 9 out of 10. A good podium for Lewis Hamilton, and I don't really think I can add much more. It's just what Lewis Hamilton needs, because Mercedes, especially at the start of the season, weren't firing on all cylinders, and I think with Mercedes now being back on the podium, quite frequently, I think it's what Lewis Hamilton needs, and he kind of has a sense to deliver in his last season at Mercedes, and this P3 finish is definitely one that he's delivered with a fantastic performance. So yeah, a 9 out of 10.
George Russell up next. So I've only gone slightly lower because of what I said. I think Hamilton was the better of the Mercedes. So I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for George Russell. He got that fantastic start, and it was a brilliant move down into turn one around the outside. But at the end of the day, he didn't have the race pace. I think he wasn't as good on his tyres as Hamilton, and that's what cost him. I think that's why he had to go onto the hards for that final stint, whereas Hamilton could afford to stretch the tyres out a little bit more and then go onto the softs because of good tyre management. So that's why I go and give Russell an 8 out of 10.
Once again, I couldn't agree more. I've settled with an 8 out of 10 for George Russell. Could have been a 7 if he was passed by Leclerc on the final lap, but unfortunately that wasn't meant to be. Yeah, brilliant move on the opening lap into the first corner, but after that it was just kind of backward step after backward step. He obviously got overtaken by Verstappen, got overtaken by Norris, and then by his teammate who was on the soft tyres. So it's an improvement. It's a massive step in the right direction for George Russell, but it's still, I think Lewis Hamilton kind of edged him out once again this weekend. So yeah, I've settled also with an 8 out of 10.
Charles Leclerc is up next. So he started fifth and he's qualified fifth and finished fifth. So I've gone for a 7 out of 10. He had that good pace towards the end. But I don't think it was particularly good enough from either Ferrari driver, but he was quicker than Sainz. Edged him out in qualifying and then seemed to have the race pace. I know there was a bit of controversy with them battling each other, but I don't particularly see any issue with that, especially when it's at the race start. You've got to fight for your position in turn one, because if you're not and you're too cautious, you're going to get swallowed up by 3, 4, 5 cars. So I have no issue with Sainz trying to make the move on Leclerc to turn one. It's fair game. If he does that sort of 3 or 4 laps in, and when the strategy is hold position after the first corner, then obviously there's an issue there. But from what I see, there was no issue with what Sainz done. But it's a 7 out of 10 from Leclerc.
Yeah, I've gone a little bit lower than George Russell. I've gone with 7.5 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc. I think it could have been an 8 if he did overtake George Russell, but it just wasn't meant to be. The quicker of the two Ferraris, I think both Ferraris would kind of be disappointed after this race, because obviously the highs of Monaco to the lows of Canada is kind of like the mid-tier of Spain. So Austria will be the next ground where they'll be hunting and hoping for a return to the podium, because yeah, it's just kind of been a bit of an up and down season for the Scuderia. But yeah, Leclerc had the better of the pace in the race, and he had Carlos Sainz's number in qualifying, so definitely did better over two Ferraris, but still nothing to write home about. So 7.5 out of 10.
And Carlos Sainz up next. So I've gone on the basis that Leclerc was slightly quicker and slightly better. So I've given a 6 out of 10 to Carlos Sainz on that basis. Yeah, like I said, I think I said all I have to say with regards to Leclerc. And I think it's applicable for Sainz as well. So yeah, 6 out of 10.
Yeah, so with my basis, I've gone with 7 for Carlos Sainz. Yeah, everything's applicable. The same what I said for Charles Leclerc as I'm going to say for Carlos Sainz. It's just it's the same bit of an inter-team battle with Hamilton and Russell and Leclerc and Sainz, and Hamilton and Leclerc are currently coming out on top in those two battles. So Carlos Sainz unfortunately wasn't able to show anything of note at his home Grand Prix. But it's another points finish in Spain, and he continues that streak. So yeah, 6th place finish is good, but it's nothing to write home about once again for the second Scuderia driver.
And next is Oscar Piastri. So he started down in 10th. And finished 7th. I've gone for a 7 on that basis, because I think he had that little mistake which cost him everything in qualifying. I think without that, he could have been ahead of the Ferrari, so starting about 5th. and then he's in a position to put an attack against a Mercedes. But starting down in 10th, maybe he could have challenged one of the Ferraris, but he couldn't do much more than he did. It's a 7 out of 10 because you've got to take into effect that his mistake cost him at the end of the day. But it's a decent performance from him.
Yeah, I've also settled with a 7 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. I think, like you mentioned there, he probably would have been ahead of the two Ferraris were it wasn't not for that mistake in qualifying. But to make two places up in the race, obviously beating out the two Alpines in the process was, I reckon, as much as he could have got and as much as he was hoping for. He was nowhere near where it kind of mattered in the top six battle, that is. So it's a 7 out of 10. It's a good performance, but I mean, Oscar could have and easily should have had a top five finish, but I mean, beggars can't be choosers. So it's a 7 out of 10. It's a decent performance, but a performance that kind of was lacking intent, especially in qualifying.
Next up is Sergio Perez. So he started down in eighth and finished eighth. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 for Sergio Perez. If Red Bull don't win the Constructors' Championship, we know the reason why. Because I think that was Verstappen will comfortably win the Drivers' Championship because he's just got that bigger margin. The Constructors is a different matter because, Red Bull have the buffer at the minute, but that is down to Verstappen. You're looking at the Ferraris are now overtaken Perez in the championship. He slipped down to fifth. And now with Mercedes joining the fight, Sergio Perez is going to be looking at the lower end of the points every single race. And I don't know if that's going to be enough between now and the end of the season for Red Bull to hang on. And I think Red Bull's biggest what they're looking for would be Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes to all take points of each other, particularly Mercedes to take points off the other two to prevent them getting too close, because you could easily see a Ferrari or McLaren winning this constructors battle, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it. So it's a 4 out of 10. Sergio Perez is costing Red Bull right now, and the fact he signed a 2-year extension on his contract is beyond me.
I've gone a little bit nicer for Sergio Perez. I've settled with a 6, purely on the basis that he did get about a 3-place grid drop that I think he'd forgotten about. So he did start from 11th. He qualified in 8th, but started from 11th. Obviously, he had the luxury of overtaking the two Alpines and Fernando Alonso to get himself back into the points. But it's still nowhere near where he should have been. I mean, he was chasing Oscar Piastri, but then still, is P7 good enough for Red Bull? I don't think so. But it's yet again another poor performance. Well, I don't say poor. I gave him a 6. So I'll see an average performance. It's points, but it's nowhere near where Christian Horner and Dr. Helmut Marko will be wanting Sergio Perez, especially after signing a 2-year extension on his contract. So yeah, it's an average performance. It's nothing special. So I've gone with a 6 out of 10.
Next up is Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. So another 9th place finish for Pierre Gasly. I've gone for an 8 out of 10. Alpine have really turned it around. They seem to be the only team that had a decent development in season. And, the awful performances from the start of the season are almost becoming a bit, a bit of a distant memory now. So 8 out of 10 for Gasly, and I'll do Ocon at the same time, finished 10th, also giving him an 8. Two good performances from the both. Another solid points, and they're making their way up the table in the championship now.
Yeah, I was gonna do the same before you kind of did that. I was gonna group the two Alpine drivers because I also both gave them an 8 out of 10. Like you said, they've certainly turned a corner, and I think they're certainly improving slowly and steadily. And I think a lot of people that I saw on social media were absolutely gobsmacked to see the two Alpines in the top 10 shootout. But then again, we've seen Pierre Gasly up in the dizzying heights of about third or fourth, I think, at Imola, if I'm not mistaken, in Q1 or in Q2, and it kind of showed us that they're making slow and steady improvements, and I think they're making improvements in the right direction so far. So to see him, it's sort of replicating a McLaren story, but on a bit of a lower scale, because they were at the back of the grid in Bahrain, and they're slowly making their way up the field. So Don't mark my words, and I don't think you can rule out, but maybe we could see an Alpine fifth or sixth sometime soon, in the near future. Don't rule that out because if they're continuing to make strides like this in the right direction, and they don't go backwards in Austria, fingers crossed, touch wood, we could see them really propel at Silverstone, kind of like show the Silverstone crowd what they're kind of made of. But yeah, both of them, 8 out of 10s, fantastic performances in qualifying and in the race, and much deserved double points finish for them.
Nico Hulkenberg up next. He finished 11th, and it's another, on the fringes of the points. I think of the 10 races so far, he's had 9 races where he's finished between 9th and 11th. And from where we thought that Haas was at the start of the season, it's a fantastic effort. Again, there's no points on offer for 11th place, as Nico Hulkenberg has found out the hard way on a lot of occasions this season. But it's a solid performance. He continues to show his worth. So it's a 7 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I'd agree on that one as well. It's a 7 out of 10. Qualifying, obviously, we're hoping that Mr. Saturday kind of pops into the Q3 shootout once again, but he wasn't able to do so. But to finish just outside the points, and he was not far away from Esteban Ocon in the end, kind of showed what hunger and desire Nico Hulkenberg still has in the sport. He's obviously making that move to kick Sauber next season, to probably be paired up with someone at Audi for 2026, and he's thinking ahead of the future. But he's most definitely still giving it his all for the Haas team, and to narrowly miss out on points and kind of drive his race, his absolute socks off. It's just a detriment, and it's not a detriment. It's a positive thing to see Nico Hulkenberg do so well after his little hiatus that he did have. So it's a 7 out of 10. And another driver that had a very, very good performance.
Up next is Fernando Alonso, who finished 12th, and it's a 5 out of 10 from me. This Aston Martin is really slipping down the grid. It's being beaten by the likes of Alpine, Haas, and it's difficult to really judge how good the actual driver's performance are. I know Alonso's beat Stroll, but then again, what does that show? So it's a 5 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I've gone with a 6. I've not gone as harsh, I don't think. Fernando Alonso. I don't know why. The thing is, I think it's this heat that's kind of causing me to name all these drivers wrongly. It's Fernando Alonso we're talking about, not Esteban Ocon that I was about to say. But Fernando Alonso, slowly but surely, I think is like picking up the pace, but it's not really what he wants or what Aston Martin need. They need points. They need to stay ahead of teams. And I think they're slowly starting to fall backwards. But it's a 6 out of 10. It's very much average, especially in front of your home crowd. You're expecting a lot more from a home favourite like Fernando Alonso, but it's just average. So I've gone with a 6.
And up next is Zhou Guanyu, who finished up in 13th. Now I've gone for a 7 out of 10 actually, because I think that that Sauber's been nowhere for a large parts of the season, and we've criticised Zhou because he's been a bit anonymous. But to be fair to him, he's put that Sauber in a good position. And if we had a race like we did at Canada, at Spain, he would have been in the points because of the drivers ahead of him crashing out. Wasn't to be on this occasion though. So 7 out of 10, and hopefully this marks an upturn in fortune.
Yeah, I've also gone with a 7. Zhou is one of them drivers that we've criticised heavily on this podcast, and whose time in Formula One may be coming to an end, especially with the contract situations that we have at the moment. But these good performances won't go amiss, especially if Kicker desperate to keep into next season. Without complimenting him too much. It was a good performance. It obviously finished ahead of Lance Stroll, which is important because Lance is just Lance. You just see him do unusual things. He finished ahead of his teammate once again. He finished ahead of the V-Carbs, and it's just a step in the right direction for him, and hopefully a step in the right direction for Kick Sauber because they've been absolutely nowhere. Have they? I don't think they've scored points this season yet. I think they're the only team not to score points. So without putting any pressure onto them, hopefully they score points next weekend because it's a sprint weekend, like we all know. And hopefully they take this good fortune from Spain into Austria and deliver a points finish. But a 7 out of 10 from me for Guan Yu Zhou.
Yeah, like you said, they're the only team that's not scored points. Only three drivers haven't scored points, the other being Logan Sargent. Up next is 14th place man Lance Stroll. And I've gone for a 5 out of 10, same as I went for Alonso, because, you got to take into account Alonso being a much better driver than Lance Stroll. So, 3 places is about the gap you'd sort of expect. I think everything I said for Alonso is applicable here as well. So it's 5 out of 10. I can't really say much more.
Yeah, very mediocre performance from Lance Stroll. 5 out of 10. Also from me. Yeah, I'm not really adding much more. I don't fancy giving Lance Stroll the airtime that he kind of wants. So yeah, 5 out of 10. Let's move on.
And up next in 15th place is Daniel Ricciardo. The V carbs were very, very poor this weekend. Daniel Ricciardo has comprehensively beaten his teammate Tsunoda. And it's after a very good performance in Canada. So I've gone for a 6 out of 10, purely because I don't think that V carb was anywhere. And I think because Ricciardo comprehensively beats Tsunoda, that's worth a couple of extra points in the rating. So 6 out of 10.
Yeah, the thing is, we're matching each other very well in these ratings, and I'm quite enjoying that because I've also given Daniel Ricciardo a 6 out of 10. It's from his qualifying, his race performance is a little bit better. But yeah, the V Cobs, especially this weekend, were absolutely nowhere. In comparison to other midfield teams, like your Alpines, like your Haas's, especially Nico Hulkenberg, your Aston Martin, even your Kick Sauber of Zhou Guan Yu. So it, it's an okay performance. It's pretty much average. Yeah, it's very average. I was contemplating between a 5 and a 6, but I've given Daniel Ricciardo about 6 out of 10 treatment. But yeah, it's none of the Daniel Ricciardo that we saw, especially in the Miami sprint, that's for sure. But maybe those upgrades will start working in Austria. So we'll have to wait and see if they do. But for now, it's only a 6 out of 10.
And next up is Valtteri Bottas. I've gone for 5 out of 10. Finishing down in 16th. He's been beaten by his teammate. So despite whitewashing Zhou in qualifying, it's 5-all in terms of race trim. So Zhou has got the race pace. He doesn't have any qualifying pace, but he's beaten Bottas yet again. So it's 5 out of 10. I think it's very, very anonymous, very average. As it's like we said all season for Sauber, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll have to agree. Agree. I didn't know I was turning into a 4-year-old. So with this heat in the UK, my brain's becoming frazzled. I'm changing driver names and I can't say my R's. So that's great. But I completely agree with you. With a 5 out of 10, it's very much. Especially the thing is, you qualified 12th, and you're hoping that you're going to be up there and fighting for maybe a point, and you just fall backwards, and you get beaten by your teammate, and it's just a bit of a kick in the teeth. So yeah, very average from Valtteri Bottas. 5 out of 10. Yeah, very anonymous compared to his teammate.
Kevin Magnussen next, and I've gone for a 4 out of 10. When you're looking at Nico Hulkenberg putting it up in 11th, then you've got to ask questions, especially because they didn't qualify too far apart. There was 13th and 16th in qualifying. So obviously Hulkenberg had that advantage, but then Hulkenberg's moved forward, Magnussen's moved backwards. So in the end, it's a big distance to be beaten by your teammate, and Kevin Magnussen just didn't do a lot in that race. So it's 4 out of 10.
Once again, agreed. Kevin Magnussen did sod all really. Went backwards, qualified, didn't even get it through to Q2. Qualified 16th, finished 17th. 4 out of 10.
Up next is Alex Albon in the Williams, and I've gone for a 4 out of 10 again. I don't know whether it's just because this isn't a track that suited the Williams, but they were absolutely awful. You kind of expect it from Sargent. You don't expect him to put in any sort of shift, but for Albon to do that badly, something's got to be wrong with that car, and I'm guessing that Carlos Sainz might be second guessing his decision based on this performance. Maybe that's part of the reason he hasn't put pen to paper as of yet. But it's really slim pickings for him. Yeah, that car didn't look good at all.
Yeah, I've gone with a 3. I've gone even lower than you. I think for Alex Albon standards, it's absolutely woeful race. Obviously, he started from the pit lane, so technically he's gained 2 places, but you're gaining places on who really? You're gaining places on Yuki Tsunoda and Logan Sargent. So to put that into context, if you're giving Alex Albon anything, if the listeners are giving Alex Albon anything above a 4, I don't know what you're doing with yourself. But for Alex Albon standards, especially after being wiped out in Canada, and kind of maybe wanting a bit of retribution for yourself, this was probably the worst way of doing it. So yeah, I've gone with a 3 out of 10.
And our penultimate driver in the driver ratings is Yuki Tsunoda. I have gone for a 3 out of 10. He's been comprehensively beaten by his teammate. And, I think this is part of the issue with Tsunoda because he's had such a good season. And then the last couple of races, he let himself down. He's running in the points in Canada, made that error, that silly mistake, and it's cost him points there. And then he's just absolutely nowhere in this race. I know, as we said, maybe the RBs are being caught up by the rest of the midfield and even overtaken, but still to finish 19th and only to Logan Sargent it's not what you want. And it's not what you need for somebody who's trying to look at Red Bull and say, look at me, I'm putting in some very good performances here, whereas the other guy isn't. So it's not what he needed at this stage of his career. So 3 out of 10.
Agreed. 3 out of 10. I think we're slowly starting to see Yuki Tsunoda declining after his positive start to the season. He's slowly started to take a bit of a tumble. And he's had 2 very poor performances. And yeah, I don't really have much to add. You've covered all the bases. If you wanted to kind of put yourself in a shop window and wanting to show off your assets, this is definitely not how you do it. Especially with Daniel Ricciardo being technically out of the picture at Red Bull because of Sergio Perez's contract extension. So yeah, it's a 3 out of 10. It's a poor performance.
And finally, Logan Sargent. I've gone for a 3 out of 10. I'm not going to add anything else because I don't think there's anything else to add.
You've gone for a 3 out of 10 for a guy that's been lapped twice. It's a 1. I'm sorry.
But you've got to go against the expectations. There are no expectations on him.
He's getting a 1. I don't care. This guy, you know what? I'm going straight to the point because I think whenever we talk about Logan Sargent, we sugarcoat a lot of things. But this guy's in Formula One because he's bringing in a bit of American money. Let's put it that way. I don't think he's in there for talent, because he's finishing near enough the bottom every single race. And if you've got talent, why don't you bring someone like Kimi Antonelli in? Why don't you maybe sign up somebody like Felipe Drugovich, see if he's available from the Aston Martin kind of reserve team there? Maybe even chuck a Liam Lawson in, especially we saw what Red Bull have kind of done with Alex Albon, and that's kind of come to fruition. So I don't know what Logan Sargent is doing, and I don't know how he's kind of still survived in Formula One. He's only had 1 point scored in his whole Formula One career. You say that there's no expectations. Yes, I completely agree with you. There's completely zero expectations for Logan Sargent, but you've got to be critical. You've got to think this sport is for the supreme, for the top racers, and he's simply not one of them. So it's a 1 out of 10. It's another P20 finish, and he's simply not good enough for this sport.
Well, here's the big question: who's had the worst time in Formula One, Logan Sargent or Nikita Mazepin? That's the big question.
I'd never thought that we'd talk about somebody of Nikita Mazepin's pedigree at all. But I would have to say Mazepin, for the pure amount of money that he's cost Haas in his what was it, season or 2 seasons? I think it was a season, wasn't it? Because he got chucked out in 2020. Or was it later on? Oh, I'm not quite sure. It might have been 22 or 23. I'm not. No, it was 22. Yeah, let's not talk about Mazepin. I think that's a topic that doesn't need to be touched upon at all.
So we'll move on to our Spanish Grand Prix predictions. So I'll kick things off. So I'll do my qualifying predictions first. I had Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Alonso. So I think I got a big fat zero.
Oh, you want mine now? Yeah, I also got a big fat zero. I had Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, and George Russell. It's like I had three of them there, just in the wrong places.
And then for the race, I had Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, and Hamilton. So I got a 1 out of 10. It's close with Norris. I had Hamilton to be up there, but yeah, not in the right order at all.
And I also finished on a big, massive 1 out of 10. I had Max Verstappen, who won the race. I had Leclerc, Norris, Sergio Perez for some reason, and Lewis Hamilton. So I had four of the five drivers there, but I just kind of didn't have them in the right order whatsoever. Right, let's jump on and talk about Formula Two and Formula Three. They were racing alongside Formula One last weekend at the Spanish Grand Prix. Let's kick things off with Formula Three. So in qualifying, Christian Mansell was on pole position, no relation to Nigel Mansell at all. Arvid Lindblad for Prema was three hundredths off in second, with Nikola Tolov also three hundredths away in third. Luke Browning for High Tech in fourth. Oliver Gerfer in fifth. Leonardo Fornaroli in sixth. Martinez Stenhorst in seventh. Lawrence Van Hoopen in eighth. Alex Dunn in ninth. Mari Boyer in 10th, Sami Magatunov in 11th, and Santiago Ramos in 12th. And obviously, it was Ramos that started the sprint race on pole position, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to get any points at all. As I think he DNF from that race, and it was actually P3 man Mari Boyer who got the race victory, with Alex Dunn getting his first podium in Formula 3, gaining 9 points, with Oliver Gerfer continuing his hot streak in third. Martinez Stenhorst was fourth, with Lawrence Van Hoopen in fifth. Noel Leon in sixth. Leonardo Fornaroli in seventh. Dino Beganovic and Arvid Lindblad, the two Prema drivers, in eighth and ninth, with Tim Tramnitz rounding off the points in 10th. And in the feature race, it was Christian Mansell that started obviously on pole position, but he was not able to convert it into a race victory. It was rookie Arvid Lindblad who got the 25 points, with Christian Mansell and Leonardo Fornaroli completing the podium. Oliver Gerfer, like I said, continuing his hot streak in the points once again in fourth. Luke Browning in fifth, with Nikola Tsolov, Alex Dunn, Mari Boyer, Dino Beganovic, and Noel Leon completing the points there. Ethan, I don't think the two of us really caught too much of a Formula 2 and Formula 3 action, but out of those drivers, who kind of impressed you the most? For myself, I'd probably go with Arvid Lindblad. I think getting his first victory of the season under his belt, and also a rookie. So it's kind of important for him to gain that victory and in a championship, kind of boosting his odds of maybe finishing as a Formula 3 champion by the end of the season.
Yeah, it's a massive moment for him, obviously getting his first win in the championship. And like you said, it massively increases his chance of getting to that stage. It's only 13 points off the top of the table at this point. I've got to say Fornaroli as well, another good performance, and he's leading the championship for a reason, with a good podium there. But it'll be interesting to see how this develops. So over the course of the season, I think we've only got 5 races left, so we're halfway through now. So yeah, it will be interesting to see which of these drivers as well can take the step up into F2. I know a few of them are associated with some of these driver academies, and whether they can get the chance in F2 and maybe even F1 if they do a good job there. But we'll see how it develops.
We'll obviously look over the two standings at the end of the episode when we kind of look ahead to the Austrian Grand Prix as both series are on at Spielberg as well. So let's jump into Formula 2 qualifying, where you saw Paul Aron edge out Jack Crawford and Franco Colapinto, who finished 2,000ths and 6,000ths respectively behind the Estonian driver who finished on pole position, with Gabriel Bortoleto and Kimi Antonelli in fourth and fifth. Ritomo Miata, somebody that isn't usually in the top 10, finished in sixth in qualifying. Joshua Dirksen as well for that AIX team, finished in seventh. Juan Manuel Correa in the top 10. It's kind of important for him, I think, to kind of get back into the top 10. It was actually 5 years to the date that he got his last pole position in Formula 2. So he was back up inside the top 10, finishing eighth in qualifying. Victor Martins, who has been struggling quite a lot lately. Everybody was expecting him to have a big push in the F2 Championship to maybe gain that seat in Formula One. But he finished qualifying in ninth with Kush Maini in 10th. And it meant that Maini, Martins, and Correa started as the front three in the sprint race, but it was Victor Martins who crossed the line first to gain another victory in the series. Kush Maini finished second. Juan Manuel Correa did finish third, but was penalised at the end of the race for track limits, which dropped him down to eighth. So Paul Aron inherited another podium and finished third. Jack Crawford in fourth, Gabriel Bortoleto in fifth, Isaac Hadjar in sixth, Ritomo Miata in seventh, and the aforementioned Juan Manuel Correa finishing eighth. But Juan Manuel Correa was able to kind of rectify his mistakes in the sprint race, and in the Formula 2 feature race was able to get back onto the podium, but it wasn't the race victory. It was only third place for him, as Jack Crawford was able to gain the race win after starting second. Franco Colapinto, after starting third, finished second. Juan Manuel Correa, as I said, finished third, with Paul Aron dropping from pole position all the way down to fourth. Isaac Hadjar in fifth, Kush Maini in sixth, but Gabriel Bortoleto seventh, Zane Maloney in eighth, Amaury Cordial in ninth, and Jose Maria Marti in 10th. Once again, Paul Aron showing the absolute class that he has. To say that he's a rookie, he's definitely not looking out of place at all, is he, Ethan?
Absolutely not. Yeah, like you said, it's another great performance for the driver. What I got to say though is I'm really happy to see Juan Manuel Correa back on the podium. Like you said, it's been a long time since he was last there. Obviously, had that awful incident several years ago. And then, from a point where he's almost losing his leg to standing back on a podium is quite simply fantastic. So yeah, it was unlucky to see him get that disqualification in the sprint race, but then to do it in the feature race as well it's great to see, and very happy to see him up there.
He wasn't quite disqualified. He only got a time penalty. But I know what you mean. Obviously, Paul Aron has a 9 point gap over Isaac Hadjar. But the real deal from that weekend was Jack Crawford gaining 30 points in total from the weekend. How crucial do you think the Formula 2 format is for any of the drivers in Formula 2 and Formula 3? Because you have two chances where you can score points, and if you score high, you could propel yourself in the championship a long way up in the championship, should I say?
Well, I actually do really like the format in F2, and I think it's when we got a sprint race weekend, this is the sort of format we should be looking at. When you switch to top 10, because it will produce better racing. Because can you imagine if we had it for the last race? So you've got Oscar Piastri starting on pole, Esteban Ocon alongside him. It varies it up, and because it's only for smaller points positions, you're going to have a lot better racing, I feel like. So I can't understand why Formula One haven't looked at introducing that, but yeah, I'm a big fan of the current format, and it gives you got two opportunities there. So when you qualify on pole, you're kind of thinking, whatever points you can get is good. And then you look into the feature race, it's all about preparing in the best way, getting used to the track and whatnot. But yeah, it's really really good format, and I'd like to see it implemented in Formula One, to be fair.
So let's just look into the Formula 2, 3 and Formula 2 standings before we round off the episode with our predictions ahead of Austria. Leonardo Fornaroli leads the way in Formula 3 ahead of Luke Browning. They're only split by 5 points. Gabriel Maini drops from top spot into third, after gaining 0 points from the weekend. Arvid Lindblad gains a place and is only 13 points away from the top spot after gaining 27 points at the weekend. Dino Beganovic drops a place behind his less experienced teammate. He drops to fifth. Oliver Gerfer gaining a healthy amount of points, remains sixth, with Christian Mansell up in seventh. Tim Tramnitz down into eighth. Mari Boyer up to ninth, and Sabi Mugatunic down in 10th. There's only a whopping 13 points, like I said, covering the top four. Which way do you think it might go this weekend, Ethan, in Austria? Do you think we'll see a kind of a swap at the top of the standings in Formula 3?
Yeah, you never know, do you? Because you've got both sprint race and the feature race. So, like we said a minute ago, if you have a bad result in qualifying, then you've got the sprint race to look forward to and to get some good points. It's a very close championship, isn't it? With you got 33 points up for grabs per weekend. Then it's like saying it really all depends on whose track this is best for, because you see it in Formula One, you've got certain drivers suit certain tracks. Like Hamilton is notoriously good around the Hungaroring. Verstappen's brilliant around Zandvoort and Spa. So you see these drivers who prefer these tracks and suit the tracks better. So it could go anyway. There's about 20 points between the top five, so any one of them could be leading the championship come the end of the weekend.
And on to Formula 2. We've obviously touched upon Paul Aaron leading the way by 9 points to Isaac Hadjar. Zay Maloney in third after only gaining 6 points. Jack Crawford made 7 places up in the championship as he's in fourth. Dennis Hauger drops a place after gaining no points. Franco Colapinto gains 2 places after gaining 18 points. Gabriel Bortoleto drops 2 after only gaining 5 points. Kush Miney moves up 1 up to 8th. Kimi Antonelli and Zach O'Sullivan drop 3 places after gaining no points from that weekend. It looks like Paul Aaron and Isaac Hadjar are slowly but surely taking the F2 Championship into a two-way battle. But like we mentioned about Formula 3, there's a feature race and a sprint race. There's 10 points on offer. Well, 11 points on a sprint race. There's 26 if you want to add fastest lap in a feature race, and then 2 points for pole position. How important do you think for Paul Aaron it is to keep the consistency going and to potentially be the first rookie, I think, since Oscar Piastri, I want to say, to finally get a F2 championship under his belt?
Well, yeah, that's the whole point about these junior series. It's all about the consistency, isn't it? And Paul Aaron has shown brilliant consistency so far. Obviously, Hajar's got those 2 race wins, which Aaron doesn't have, but that's been Aaron's biggest strength, is his consistency. So it really all depends on that. But like you said, there's so many points up for grabs that you could easily see some of the other drivers close that gap. And with sort of 6 or 7 races left, it could be anyone's guess who ends up come the end of the season. And then let's move on to the Austrian Grand Prix predictions. So I'll kick things off with my 2-star predictions. I'm going for Hulkenberg to get points. He's been on the cusp of points the last couple of races, so I think he's finally going to get a point or 2. And then I've gone for a bit of a niche one. I've gone for there to be an incident at turn 4. Now, over the years, we've seen a lot of crashes happen at that corner. At the end of the third of the DRS zones. So I think there'll be another incident at the weekend. So I'm going for an incident at turn 4 to spice things up a little bit.
And for my 3-star predictions, I've gone 3 constructors on the podium. This is where I kind of go into technical details. I'm going 3 constructors in the top 3 in the sprint shootout, in the sprint, in qualifying, and in the race. So a top three kind of varied up once again, and I've gone for Pierre Gasly points. It might be a little bit of a cop out. He's had 2 points finishes in the last two races, but yeah, I think we're going to see Alpine kind of continue their consistency and maybe finish in the top 10 once again.
So for qualifying, I'm going for Lando Norris to take pole. I think this will be a track that suits McLaren down to the ground. They had a very good performance there last season, and I don't see anything changing this year. I've gone Verstappen alongside him. These two seem to be
Let me just pause you. It's a sprint weekend.
It's a sprint weekend, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to do yours first then?
Okay, cool. I'll do mine. You can muster yours up. Okay, so continuing on, I'm gonna hit you with my sprint shootout and my sprint race prediction. So I've gone with Max Verstappen taking sprint pole position, with Lando Norris in second, George Russell in third, Oscar Piastri in fourth, and Charles Leclerc in fifth. But I see a little bit of a difference, a little bit of a change, and I think Lando Norris will take the sprint race win, with Max Verstappen second, Charles Leclerc third, George Russell in fourth, and Lewis Hamilton in fifth.
So for my sprint qualifying and sprint race predictions, I'm going for Verstappen to take the pole. I've gone for Lewis Hamilton to take second place. Norris and Piastri completing the second row, third and fourth, and George Russell in fifth. And then for the sprint race itself, I'm going for Verstappen to take the win, Norris to beat Hamilton, and then I'm actually going for Russell fourth and Charles Leclerc in fifth. And then for the main event itself, I'm going Lando Norris to take qualifying pole. Max Verstappen alongside him. Those two seem to have a bit of a run going, getting first and second. Leclerc in third, Hamilton fourth, and Russell fifth. And then I'm finish things off with my race predictions. I'm going for 3 in a row for Max Verstappen, Lando Norris to make it 3 in a row second places, Hamilton to get another podium position, and then Piastri and Leclerc wrapping up the top 5.
And finally, for my qualifying and race predictions, I've gone Max Verstappen to take pole, Lando Norris second, Charles Leclerc to finish third with his teammate right behind him, Carlos Sainz in fourth, with George Russell in fifth. And for the race, I see Max Verstappen winning once again, with Charles Leclerc taking a very, very out of the blue second place, with Lando Norris in third, George Russell in fourth, and Carlos Sainz in fifth. That's it from me.
Thank you all for listening to this bumper episode of On the Grid podcast. We will be back next week looking over our predictions, looking over the Austrian Grand Prix, and then previewing to a big, big race in the season. We'll be looking forward to Silverstone. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye.